Hi there everybody, this is Brian, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a fun little effect that you can create in PowerPoint using the animations features. We're going to be creating a sliding number counter, and this is a great element that you can add to your presentations. Perhaps your presentation is a little bit more stats driven or infographic driven. This adds a little bit of a dynamic element to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you what I'm talking about. So when I hit click here, you'll notice that it scrolls through and ends up on a nice 65. But you guys didn't come here to learn how to, or you guys didn't come here to watch the animation. You came here to learn how to build it. So I'm going to escape out of here, and I'm going to delete everything from this slide because I want to show you how to build this out from scratch. So the first thing I would recommend is that you keep a certain feature in PowerPoint open. So if you go to Arrange and at the bottom here you go to Selection Pane, this creates a nice little pane here for you that will help you to keep track of all the elements on your slide. I'd also recommend that you have the Animations pane open as well. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to create a column of numbers. So you're going to want to start with 0, hard return, and create a column going from 1 all the way to 9, and then cap that off with another 0. Once you have this set up, I would recommend center justifying and then choosing a font that you feel comfortable with. For this case, I'm going to use Arial Black. It's a pretty basic one, but it should serve this purpose. And we're going to change the font size. We'll just knock it up to 100, but you can size it to whatever you want. Next, we're going to go into the selection pane and we're going to rename this item. We're going to call this the tens column. Now we're going to create a duplicate of this by holding down Control and Shift and then dragging to the right. And we're going to rename this section the ones column. Then I'd recommend zooming out, and I'd recommend using your 4s as a great way to gauge how to space these columns. It tends to be the widest number in the column. And just going to nudge it in there, because ideally what you want is a bunch of nicely even spaced out numbers. Once you have these two, select them both and just position wherever you want on the slide. For this case, I'm just going to kind of pull it pretty close to the center, but it can go anywhere. Once you have these two columns nicely spaced out and placed where you'd like them on the slides, we're going to go to Animations and we're going to add an animation. And the animation you want to add is the motion path lines. And go to Effect Options, and we're going to select Up. Once you have your the animation applied to your two columns, go and select them again, hold down Control and Shift, and drag up one more time, and this time we're going to be creating another set of columns. And these two columns are going to serve as your guides, so I'd recommend changing out the color. I like to go with like a nice gray to make it stand out from both the background and the numbers themselves. And we're going to rename these in the selections pane. So for the ones column, we're going to change this to ones guide. And for the tens column, we're going to change it to, you guessed it, the tens guide. Once you've renamed these, we're going to select both of them and drag them all the way up here, because the goal is you want to eclipse the top zeros of your columns with the bottom zeros of your guides. Try to zoom in as close as you can get it, because the name of the game here is you want to get these things pixel perfect. So as you can see, I've been doing this a lot, so I'm pretty good at eyeballing it, but let me just show you what I mean. You don't want any of this black showing, so with the arrow key just feel free to nudge everything down and just make sure that none of that black is visible in the background. Once you've properly done this, now you have everything kind of spaced where you need it to be. So ideally what you're going to do here is you want to use your start and end points from your guides as guides for your start and end points in your columns. So you're going to, we're going to first start with the ones column here, and we're going to click on this red arrow at the top here. This is the end point of your animation. So you're going to grab this and you want to drag this all the way up here and get it as close as you can get it to the start point in your ones guide. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because it seems to not be cooperating here. So there you go. And note that now as I zoom in, it snaps nicely there. And what's happening here is that if you look at the ghosted version of this, the bottom 0 is now at the end state going to align with where the end 0 is in your guide. Now for the tens column, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated because in our example we wanted it to end on the 6. So what you're going to do is you're going to locate the 6 in your tens guide, highlight it, and the first thing you're going to want to do is change out the color here, change it to something that'll stick out. So I like to just do like an orange. And then we're going to change this number to 0. Once you've done this, go ahead and zoom in again, and what you're going to do is drag this orange 0 down to once again eclipse out the 0 in your tens column. And then once again just zoom in here because, as I'd mentioned, the name of the game here is pixel perfect. You want to perfectly eclipse that black to make sure none of it shows through. Once you've done this, again you're going to grab the red arrow at the top of your motion path. This is your endpoint, and you're going to drag this up to the start point in your tens guide. And now you'll notice that in the ghosted version here, the 6 snaps perfectly into place. So you'll notice on the right side of the selection pane there are a couple of eyeball icons. We're going to go and make these invisible for now. So if you click on them, it'll hide those elements. And I'm going to take this into slideshow mode just to show you what exactly we're building. And you'll start to see the makings of the animation that we're trying to create. When you hit click, look how it pops perfectly to that 60. So we're actually done with the tens guide, so we don't even need to make that visible anymore, but feel free to keep that on there in case you want to experiment a little bit further. You can change up the number placement. But in the ones guide, we're going to make this visible again because we still have a little bit more work to do. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when you're working with the ones guide, because you'll notice that in the example the ones column actually scrolled through multiple times from 1 to 0. So we're going to go into the animations pane, and in the ones column we're going to double click, and the first thing you're going to do in here is drop the smooth start and the smooth end down to 0. In the timing we want to set up a repeat, so because we're trying to get to 6, that means that it needs to scroll through 6 times. So we're going to change the repeat from none to 6, and we're going to hit OK. So now you're starting to see the makings of it, and it goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And here's where we're going to have to do a little bit of math. So to keep this pretty manageable and easy to observe, we're going to make this a 6-second animation. So in the tens column, we are going to change the animation duration a little bit. We're going to change it to 6 seconds. And now here's where math comes in a little bit, because basically you want the ones column to cycle through 6 times in the time it takes for the tens column to get from 0 to 6. So we just basically need to factor in 6 divided by 6, and we're going to get 1 second. So now what you're telling this is it's going to cycle through 6 times for over 6 seconds, so that means 1 second duration. Once again, we're going to hide the ones guide, and we'll go into presenter mode. And now you're seeing the makings of it. You notice that it cycles through those 6 times, and then it ends up on 60. However, we want it to end up on 65, so here's where we're going to have to do just a little bit more work and add a secondary animation to that ones column. So let's make that ones guide visible once again. And much like we did with the 6, we're going to highlight the 5 here. And we are going to first change the color again to that orange, and we're going to change this to 0. Now here's the important part. Select the ones column animation, and we're going to add an animation. We're going to add another motion path line. Change it again to up. And in the ones guide, we are going to eclipse that top 0 with our new orange 0. Again, I recommend zooming in as closely as you can get it and eclipse out that black. And using your arrow key, just kind of nudge it to make sure that it's not visible at all. So now once again you have this start point from your guide. I'm going to zoom out until you can see the end point of this new animation, which will be at the bottom here. Once again, click on that red arrow and drag it up to that start point of your guide. And it should snap perfectly into place there, and you'll see ghosted back that you have the 5 ending up exactly where you want it to be. So we're actually done with the ones guide now, so we're going to make that invisible. And we're going to do a little bit of animation, a little bit of massaging to the that second animation or motion path that we've added here. So once again, you're going to double click. And this time we're going to end this with a nice smooth end. And in timing, we're going to set this up to start with previous. And because we're only going halfway through the column this time, we don't need it to be 1 second. We're going to set it up to be 0.5 seconds. So very fast. And no need to apply any repeat on this one. And then finally, we want this to align with the very end of the previous animation. So we're going to change the delay to 6 seconds. And we're going to take this into slideshow view again so you can see how this all ends up. Hit click, and now you'll notice that it scrolls through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, cycles through, and then ends on 65. So the final thing that we're going to be doing to wrap this up is we are going to be creating a mask for everything. So you're going to create a rectangle. And you want to get this as close to the top of the ones and tens column as you can get it. And we are going to actually format this a little bit. So I would recommend right-clicking on this rectangle, and at the very bottom go to Format Shape. And you're going to want to change your fill. Now, because it's on a white background, you may be tempted to just change the fill color to white, but I'd recommend you actually go all the way down to the bottom here and use your slide background fill. And I'll explain why you're going to want to do that in a second, but then you're also going to go in here and remove the line. And then using the same trick of Control Shift and dragging down this object, you're going to create a duplicate bottom portion of the mask. And once again, just try to get it as tight as you can to the bottom of the 0 here. And then bring it all the way down to the bottom of your slide. You can select both and group this, and this just makes it a little bit easier to align everything. And here we go. We're going to take it into a slideshow mode again. And now you can see it scrolls through and no one is the wiser to the animation happening in the background. Ends up on 65. Now, as I'd mentioned, there's a reason why you want to select fill with background, and the reason you're going to want to do this is because say you want to change the background a little bit, you can actually do things like maybe you want to do a gradient fill. You'll notice that your mask now takes on the characteristics of the gradient in the background. It also works if you want to do something like a pattern, and we'll take that in there. And then once we scroll through there, it's still masked out and no one's the wiser of what's happening in the background. But what's really fun about this is you can also do a picture, a texture fill. And if you go down to pictures here, I have one queued up. Now notice that the mask also mimics the image in the background. So look at that. Alright, well that is it for this tutorial. I hope that you found it informative and enjoyable. Feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I hope to build some more of these types of tutorials, and I am definitely open to any constructive feedback. Thank you for taking the time, and hopefully you have fun experimenting with this new animation technique. Thank you.